three vocations of motherhood and marriage and teaching, I think that they all lead to holiness because in all of the vocations there's an element of sacrifice and giving of yourself. And I believe that all of those are what we have to do. We kind of have to lose ourselves to find ourselves. And by doing that, we truly become like Christ, and our holiness grows. And it's this weird paradox about the more you give of yourself, the more you become yourself in return. And by myself, I mean like I'm a daughter of Christ, and mirroring that love in the Trinity, which is completely, a giving of yourself for infinity. So I think you experience it in different ways. First, for me, obviously, is in the order. Well, I got married before I started teaching, and then 2 months later I started teaching. So those vocations began kind of at the same time. I feel like my marriage is my primary vocation because I'm always like everything in my life refers back to my husband and my children, and my students as well. But I feel like my primary way of reaching heaven is through my marriage and my children. So being a gift to the world through our vocations is a really, sometimes we're not thinking of that when we get married because we're in love and we're just excited about getting married. But then we realize that there's a quote I have that I love that I was told when I was getting married, which is, marriage isn't about looking at each other. It's about looking together, something outside of yourself, but looking at it together in the same directions. And so the idea of a marriage is my husband and I looking at something bigger than us, which for us is Christ and the world, and thinking about how we can be a sign of Christ in the world. And the fact that people just stay married to each other is already, I think, a great sign, and they don't give in to the difficulties and decide to give up on each other and in the marriage. So I think primarily just the fact that you stay with each other, even when things are difficult, is a sign to the world and a gift to the world. And then obviously the children that come out of a marriage, it's the idea of the domestic church, and that our church begins with these tiny, tiny little churches called domestic churches, and that if Christ is present in the family, then it spreads, and it's like a domino effect to the world. And so that's something my husband and I have always tried to keep in mind when we offer, like, they're not our children, they're Christ's children, and how are they called to be signs of Christ in the world. And then through teaching, I feel like I live that every day because I'm here because I love Christ, and I want to be a sign of Christ to my students, or just an experience of faith that's positive for them and makes them realize that even though there's like all this negativity about the idea of religion, or specifically some of the negativity of the Catholic Church, that I love my faith and I love Christ, and I want to be someone who can show them love and compassion, and my I would give my life for the church. So and I feel like I am in a way, even though I can be selfish and complain about how difficult teaching religion can be because not everyone's interested. I think that is my gift, to just keep doing it and trying again every day. So I think in marriage, one of the gifts and maybe a charism is just your ability to be present with another person and not get frustrated with them. So patience, a lot of patience, and mercy and forgiveness and compassion, because when you're with anyone more than 24 hours, and you realize, oh wow, I'm with them for the rest of my life, just like with your siblings or your parents or your cousins or whoever, just realizing like you can't be critical of them, super critical of them, without that causing negativity, and that you have to find a way to love them as they are, and you have to find a way to love yourself as you are too. And then with your children, I mean, it's the same thing. Like, they're not going to be exactly how you think they should be. So how do you show mercy and love and acceptance towards them? And I guess it's the same for students as well. Just letting go of your ideas of how people should be, and realizing this is who they are, and God loves them, and they may, not be, the person that you envisioned as far as their behavior or things they choose to do, but how can you love them? And you can still like try to form them and guide them and give them advice, but just not getting annoyed because you're being like inconvenienced by something. I don't know if that makes sense. So I guess patience and mercy and forgiveness, and also just being able to listen. I think that's really important for all three vocations. So for marriage, I think the joy and challenge of joy is being able to, I feel like I get to spend every day with my best friends, which is an incredible joy. And just like going through, I met my husband when I was 18 in college. So we've gone through college and grad school and 5 children and first communions and baptisms and just all the really cool events of life that you go through. But even the small joys of just being able to be together and see each other every day and spend holiday, just all the things of life, the cycle of life. And the challenges, of course, are, like I spoke about before, that time where you feel like this isn't easy, this is inconvenient, I'm giving, and I remember really good advice is don't keep a tally score about like who's done more, because that's a really good way to ruin a marriage. And to just be able to say, it doesn't matter if I did the dishes, or it doesn't matter if I do the laundry, and I feel like I'm always doing it. I mean, obviously you can have a discussion about it, but it's not about keeping score. It's about this idea, like I spoke about in the beginning, of constantly giving of yourself, and realizing that when you do that out of love, you will actually become more yourself. And I guess it's the same with children. I can't tell you how many diapers I've changed, or how many times I've been helping people with homework, and just on and on and on, and things that if I kept score, I'd probably be kind of miserable. But instead, I really, really try to turn that into an opportunity to feel like, oh wow, and this is little, but it's big. And then same with teaching. Challenges are, you have 30 different kids in your class, you have 30 different personalities, but the joy is actually learning who they are and just loving them so much and just wanting the best for them. And then you multiply that by 5 classes, and you've got these, 100 plus kids that you get to meet every year, and it's just an incredible joy. With marriage, really the daily life is just being together and not letting it become monotonous, staying in communication, continually letting the person know how much you care about them. Same with children. You see them every day and you get used to just seeing them. How do you make sure that they know that they matter? How do they know that you notice them? Because most of the times we're so stressed out and we're just like, oh my gosh, this is what I have to do, and they're like peripheral vision, and it's like, how do you put them back into your line of sight? And I heard one person say, try to make eye contact every day with the people in your life, and just look them in the eye and have a conversation with them, let them know that they matter. Obviously, if you can say I love you, that's a great gift, but just to have a conversation with them eye to eye, that's something I always struggle with, but try to do. The great events, and that applies for all 3 vocations. The great events, I think, with the marriage is obviously your marriage and your anniversaries and the birth of a child and your sacramental life, the baptisms, the first communions, the confirmations. Those are all just such joyous events. My kids are my biggest blessing, my 5 children, and I just love the fact of seeing them grow up, and with my best friend, we get to watch our children grow up, and that's just an incredible thing. With teaching, you grow as a teacher too, from a little tiny teacher to a teacher that has learned and has experience, and hopefully that makes you wiser and more patient with people. Like, I know I'm a different teacher now that I've had my own children than I was before I had children. So I think that to me is like the biggest differentiation in my phases of teaching. So the discernment process for a vocation is really, I think, a pivotal time for every person to take seriously. And I feel like a lot of people just go through the motions without realizing what discernment is or how necessary it is, and kind of just let life happen to them. And God will work through that as well, but I think it's so much better to be intentional and present to the process. And it starts now when you're in high school, with praying for God to show you what will make you happy and how He's calling you to work in the world. And obviously your primary discernment is going to be, first of all, decide if you're called to live a life of celibacy or to live a life of marriage. And then you may feel like you have a vocation to the priesthood or to the religious life. But I think so many people just don't even consider that. So I think the first discernment process is just to be open to the fact that you don't really know yet and it's too early to know, and to keep all the options open, including the religious life, and then just ask God for signs along the way as you finish high school, as you go to college. And really in my life, it was really clear. God helped me understand which path He had in mind for me, and then when I figured it out, it corresponds. What corresponds to your heart in the most full way, and you'll know it when it happens, when you meet the right person, when you find the right vocation as far as a job, and then when you're called to marriage, either fatherhood or motherhood. It's just like the biggest gift you could ever imagine. So it's a long process. It's not fast. It doesn't happen like in a year. It takes years and years of praying and being open and then looking for signs.
Now that we have heard Mrs. Bassich speak regarding vocations, I wanted to add my own observations, which specifically tie into my family, pictured here. Before discussing my outside sources, the core topics of this unit should be addressed, particularly vocations, which are God's call to embrace a life of holiness. Our primary vocation is something such as married life, priesthood, or the religious life, and God also calls each of us to vocations through our occupations and roles in our family life. I chose to interview Mrs. Bassich because of how I am feeling called to marriage, motherhood, and teaching right now, which are all vocations that Mrs. Bassich has. Many laity or lay faithful serve as witnesses to God's love and might here on earth through their families, and with families comes the responsibility to live as God calls those who enter into marriage, be it through practicing chastity, specifically before marriage, and using methods of family planning within marriages that are in line with the church, such as natural family planning. One of my outside sources was from the National Catholic Register, and it discussed how one's family can have its own vocational call, especially in terms of whether it is a more active or contemplative environment. An active family life is one in which families serve God in an active way through their busy schedules that are packed with activities that give glory to God. And then a contemplative family is one whose life revolves around activities within the home, which is the result of limiting outside activities. And I just found it super interesting to learn about the different ways to serve God through the specific vocation of parenthood. And then another thing I found interesting was learning about the role of children in marriage. For this, I turned to my YouCat, or the Youth Catechism of the Catholic Church, and on page 228 it states that a child is a creature and a gift of God which comes to earth through the love of his parents. And this little snippet went on to emphasize that children are not mere carbon copies of their parents, something that's often forgotten in our society. And then the YouCat also tackled the subject of how many kids a couple should have, saying that a Christian marriage and then the Christian couple subsequently has as many children as God gives them and they can take responsibility for. And that's all the supplemental advice that I've learned through my research regarding marriage and family life, two of the vocations Mrs. Bassich explored. And now here are my works cited entries. Thank you for watching this very long video.